Hello class, my name is Deborah Romero and I am 60 years old. I was born and raised in New York, and Mr. B had asked me to share, excuse me, my story of 9/11 because I was there that morning. I was scheduled to carpool, driving my sister to Manhattan as she worked in NYU, and then I would take the car back and drive back to my place of business, which was the New York City Board of Ed, where my niece was in the car because she worked in my building as well. That morning, after I dropped off my sister, my niece and I were in the car. We're driving down, passing, we were a block away from the Twin Towers, and we heard the roar of the plane, and it shook our car. So here's part two. So we heard the roar of the plane, and we felt the vibration, and we heard the fireworks. That's what it sounded like, far away bombs exploding. And then all of a sudden, we saw a lot of people in the street, and we were wondering, well, why are there people in the street? And they were pointing up. And then when I looked through my windshield, I noticed, because we were that close to the World Trade Center, we were a block away. There was a hole in one of the towers, and there was a lot of black smoke, a lot of glass falling, a lot of papers in the air, and it was just a pretty scary sight to see. A lot of people wondering what happened, because no one really knew that a plane actually hit the building. So I pulled over my car because I couldn't drive anymore. There were so many people in the street. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So we stood there for about 5 or 6 minutes, people wondering, people talking about it, what it could possibly be. Was it a commuter plane? All kinds of guesses as to what hit the building. But as I'm looking up at the building, there were a lot of terrible things that people should not see that I saw. But the fire was roaring, and the black smoke was filling the air, and, the papers were flying. And then when I saw the building move, I said to my niece, let's get in the car, because I think this building's going to fall down. So thank goodness we were able to get in the car and race across the bridge before they closed it. A question sent to me by Mr. B says, what were you most afraid of during the attack? So I'm going to continue my story, because this is when I started to get afraid. After we were able to get over the Brooklyn Bridge, my place of work was right over the bridge, where my building, if you're on the 18th floor, you can actually see the World Trade Center. So by the time I got back to work, we didn't know what was going on, if it was terrorists. We didn't know what happened. So we thought it was okay. The fire department's going to deal with it. And I'll see it on the news. But then the second plane hit. Then I started to panic, because I knew at that time it was a terrorist attack. And I needed to go get my sister. And I thought about my daughter, who was in school in Staten Island, and you just didn't know if something else was going to happen, if something else was going to blow up. It was pretty scary. So continuing my story, it was just pretty scary. I ran up to my office real quick, and there were some people there visiting, and apparently one of them had a family member that worked in the World Trade Center, and she started to cry, and she got very sick. She passed out because she just started crying so bad because she didn't know anything about her loved one. So at that moment, I started to worry, and I decided to leave and try to drive home. I couldn't drive home because everyone was in the streets. The trains had stopped, because there's a train that runs under the World Trade Center. So that kind of messed up all the other subways, the other trains. It was hard. It was very hard for me to get home. So I had to stop at my sister's house in Brooklyn. So I have a lot of sisters. So I have 5 more sisters. So my little sister lives in Brooklyn, while my other sister was still in Manhattan, and there was no way for me to get to her, and there was no way for me to get home to pick up my daughter who was in Staten Island because all the bridges were closed. So I had to stay with my little sister. So I stayed there, and my sister who worked in Manhattan, thank goodness she was safe, but she had to walk home. So that means that she had to walk over the bridge and walk through all the city streets to get back home. So it was pretty difficult trying to get to her, but thank goodness my brother-in-law was able to get to her. There was just so much going on and so much in the air. It started snowing ashes from the building, which hurt your sinuses. It was just terrible. Okay, so Mr. B's next question was, how have the September 11 attacks impacted your family and friends? So I had some friends that worked for Cantor Fitzgerald and worked in that building, and they didn't make it, especially the ones that worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, because that is the floor that the first plane hit, and basically everything on that floor was disintegrated. So his remains were never found. As far as myself, I stopped going to Manhattan. I loved the city of Manhattan, the lights, the plays, the movies, the shopping. I was always in Manhattan, but I stopped going because I was afraid. Everyone was afraid of this happening again during that time. Okay, so another question I have here from Mr. B is, are you worried that an attack similar to 9/11 could happen again? Why or why not? One would always worry because anything is possible, right? But we became a safer country after 9/11. Yeah, there are certain things that do happen, but I think that we are a bit more safer. So that's basically how I feel about that. And I'm always aware of my surroundings, and, I'm always watching the news, which is pretty important. Next question. Let's see. What are your memories on how 9/11 brought Americans together? Okay, so I'm going to leave that for the next slide because a lot did happen, which was actually one of the positive things that did come out of this sad occurrence. Okay, so what are the memories of 9/11 that brought Americans together? So the one thing I remember was when I was driving through the streets, everyone was walking the streets that morning because, as I said, the subways and everything stopped, all transportation. And those who had a car like me would ask anyone if they needed a lift somewhere because there were many people crying in the street, many people that were upset. And, during that moment, we forgot about everything and just wanted to help each other. The same thing happened with, Ground Zero. The people who were volunteering to help, remove the rubble or try to find folks who may have been trapped, as well as people running to give blood. I was very proud of my country at that time. Very proud of my city. Okay, Mr. B's next question is, what advice do you have for me as a young person to better understand the impact of September 11 attacks? Well, as a young person who probably wasn't there, it's important to understand the history of how it happened, why it happened, and who it impacted, and especially those who had relatives that were affected by it. It's so important to know that history because that changed not only New York City, but it changed America. It made us a little bit more vigilant and a little more safer. That's the one impact that it has. Let's see next. Okay, one of the last questions are, what does being an American mean to me? I'm a very proud American. I was born and raised here. It's the land of opportunity. It is a much safer place to live. I fly my American flag on my house. Our freedom, most of all. You don't realize how much freedom we do have compared to a lot of other countries that are oppressed, or other countries in this world that have bombings that happen on a daily basis, or the behavior that oppresses women's freedom or other people's freedom. So I am proud to be an American, and I love the freedom that we have and all the opportunities that it has to offer.